there's a few problems that we're trying to solve, but chiefly that building a secure retirement is harder than it's ever been. The genesis of how I kind of put this all together for the presentation was that I have a good friend and a college roommate that I'm still friends with today, and he's a firefighter. And we're approaching let's call it late middle age, and he was just realizing that even though he's one of the few jobs anymore that actually has a pension, right? There's so few jobs nowadays that have pensions, where our parents all used to have them, and he was just not feeling like he was in a position that was secure for his retirement, even though this is, he's the son of a CPA, he's very frugal, he's a saver, but he just was not feeling like he was going to be able to get where he needed to be. And his job is a physical job. And so, I remember him telling me, look, I don't want to be 65 and trying to carry somebody on my back out of a house fire. I need to be able to supplement my retirement another way, and frankly just don't want to be doing that at 65 years old. So that's kind of where it came from for me. So I'd say, the first problem is that, we don't, like I said, we don't have pensions anymore. So that guaranteed income after 40 years of work just isn't there. It's on us to build our own retirement and our own pensions these days.
Yeah. Go ahead. Were you going to finish your sentence? I was going to add something, but I'll finish.
No, I was just going to say, if you want to add anything there.
Yeah. For me, it just seems to me that the peaks and valleys, the crashes and booms seem to be ever more frequent. We live in an era where, the Federal Reserve is constantly tampering with fiscal stimulus, monetary stimulus, manipulating the amount of dollars in circulation, manipulating the interest rates in the economy. And, let's call that all with good intent. But the result is we seem to have these epic booms and epic busts in more consistent fashion. And I just believe that as a result of all those things that Drake mentioned, and some of the actions that's going on with the manipulation of fiscal and monetary policy, the manipulation of interest rates and the amount of money in the economy, all those things are leading to inflation and really a more difficult path to build a secure retirement. So what we are going to share today is really a culmination of what we've learned over the last 20 years, not only as mortgage advisors. We get the luxury, the benefit of seeing thousands of customers and clients. Many have done it right and many have done it wrong, and we get a purview right into the financial lives of all those people. And so we've learned some great lessons there. But also, yes, we will introduce ourselves. Thank you very much. Background, that's a good call. But also to Uma's comment there in the chat, we are investors ourselves. So, Drake and I own single family homes. We do nightly rentals. We do long-term rentals. We own apartment buildings. We own medical office buildings. We own retail buildings. Drake owns the part owner in a swim school. So we have a between the two of us, we manage and own somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 rental properties all across the country. Most of mine are in the U.S., but Drake owns, stuff across the country. And so not only are we, practitioners in terms of mortgage advisors and seeing success stories in people who have done that as well, but we also have practiced what we're going to teach tonight for the last 20 plus years. Drake, anything else you would add before we kick off?
No, I think you got it.
All right. Well, it's 6:06. Let's jump right in. Well, I guess it's only 6:06 if you're in the mountain zone. If you're in North Carolina, then it's 8:06.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen then, and off we go.
Gotcha. We can see your screen now, Drake.
Great. Perfect. Okay, so like we discussed, problem one is that we're kind of on our own to build our own retirement. There's no pensions anymore. And as Josh, you alluded to regarding the Fed and all the manipulations that they're doing and responding to. Problem two is there's a risk in terms of when we get to retirement, like this year, for example, the stock market's down 20%. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but that presents some serious challenges if you were relying on your stock portfolio alone to fund your retirement, and it goes down 20+% in the first year that you're in retirement. And then problem three is, as we're all experiencing in detail right now, inflation. So inflation is sort of that ever-present challenge that people don't think about for the most part, but it's always there, and it's accelerated or enhanced the last year. So we're really feeling it this year, but it's always running in the background there. It's not always as front of mind as it is these days. And so our goal with this is to help you understand the risks and help you achieve financial independence and make work optional sooner.
I love that.
Cool. So let's just jump right in. All right. So what's your financial strategy? So historically, I kind of alluded to our parents, right? The old way was you get a job, you work there for 40 years, they'd have a pension for you, and you'd retire, and that pension would fund your retirement until you passed away, right? And we all know that nowadays retirements are lasting longer because we're living longer than we were back in those days. So, like the old way was get a job, W-2 job, get a degree, go to college, pay off your debt and save, and your savings and your pension would get you there. I would say nowadays that doesn't exist too often. And so I'm going to argue that the new way is you're going to have to be somewhat of an entrepreneur, even in addition to your job. You're going to have some serious financial literacy because you're in charge of funding your own pension manager. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to use leverage, and you're going to have to invest. And, I'm all for, we're going to talk about stocks and bonds and all those things. I'm all for, of course, using those things, but I just don't believe in this day and age that a person can get to a comfortable retirement without using leverage. And that's one of the most powerful features of real estate is the leverage that we use.
Yeah. And when we talk about save in the left column there, what we mean is, stick your money in the coffee can and bury it in the backyard, or stick the money in the bank and make, 1 or 2%. But in the current reality, and very likely in certain phases of future state as we move forward, I think it's likely that we're going to have bouts of inflation and then deflation. And if you don't have leverage, and if you don't invest, and you don't find a rate of return that exceeds the rate of inflation, it's going to be really difficult to build a secure retirement. So just to clarify the difference between saving and investing.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the 4% rule, this is what financial advisors generally use to help you figure out how much you're going to need to retire. So this is sort of the traditional way, using stocks, bonds, et cetera, to figure out how much you're going to need. And what that means, what the 4% rule is essentially you take your nest egg, right? Your savings at the time you're retiring, and you can withdraw 4% of your investments the first year in retirement, and then every year thereafter you can adjust for inflation. And so by following this formula, you have a pretty high probability of not outliving your money during a 30-year retirement. So that the example here is based on having $1 million portfolio. The 4% rule would say that you can take $40,000 your very first year of retirement, and then slightly increase that for inflation every year thereafter.
And then we just explained the AKA 25x earnings, because I think that's a good way to think about that as well.
Thank you. Yeah. And so just really to make the math easier, frankly, 4% rule, instead of dividing by 0.04, you can just take whatever earnings that you want to have. Sorry, not explaining that well. So whatever you want to be living off of, you have to have 25 times that number in retirement. So for example, $10,000 a month is $120,000 a year. $120,000 times 25 is $3 million. So that's just a little bit easier way of math. So once you have 25 times of your annual earnings saved up, that's when you can retire.
Based on this equation.
Exactly.
Great.
So with that, this is from Charles Schwab's website. You can see it also depends on your planning time horizon. So the column on the left, the 4% rule is for assuming a 30-year retirement. If you want to have a shorter retirement, 20 years, you can bump that up to 5.5%. And if you only plan to retire for 10 years, you can be pulling, 9.5 to 10%. However, by their, I don't want to say admission, by their rules, it's only a 75 to 90% confidence that you're going to be okay based on those numbers. So for me personally, a 1 in 4 to 1 in 10 chance that I'm going to run out of money before I die is not acceptable. I don't know about you, Josh.
Yeah, and just to clarify, kind of like, well, why would it only be 75 to 90%, right? They run all kinds of complicated analysis. They call them Monte Carlo simulators, right? If this happens, then that would be the outcome, and they've got the supercomputers to do that. But basically, Drake kicked off saying, here we are, and so far in the year, the stock market is down 23, 24%. Well, if you started your first year in retirement and you started to draw off of your portfolio when your portfolio has gone down 20, 24, 25%, that's where, that's the variable that says, oops, sorry, your first year was 2022, you're the 75%. So now you have a 25% chance you're going to run out of money before, you run out of life. So that's kind of like some of the variables that play into that.
Exactly. So let's show what this looks like in real life. So for simplicity, so the top graph is assuming today. So this is the scary thing, right? Like, think about how much you live on today and how much you're going to need to live on in retirement, right? A lot of people don't want to do this because it is kind of scary to think about, like, how much am I going to need to retire and how am I going to get to that number? So across the top, we'll just say, let's use the middle example. We'll say you're living on $10,000 a month now. The 4% rule would say that you need $3 million or 25 times your earnings at time of retirement. The only problem with that is that's not accounting for inflation now. So if we say in 20 years, what's a $10,000 a month lifestyle going to cost you in 20 years, assuming 2.5% inflation in the lower graph, you're going to need $16,000, over $16,000 a month to live a $10,000 a month lifestyle today. So what that means then is that you're not going to need $3 million. You're going to need closer to $5 million in 20 years from now, if you want that same lifestyle.
And here's what's super scary to me. We're living in an age of 8 and 10% inflation. This is just assuming 2.5% inflation. But what if that number trended higher over that period of time, 4 or 5%? Well, then that number gets really, really big. And as we're going to walk through here, there's just a better hedge for inflation than just retirement accounts like this that we're showing.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. So how do we get there, right? Like the standard way, we got to get to this large nest egg. And of course, we've all been preached to index funds, right? Which is great. I do this myself. I know Josh does as well. You use your 401ks, your IRAs, brokerage accounts, and you just stuff as much as you can in those accounts. And the historical average of the S&P 500 is around 10%, right? So I'm assuming everyone knows what the S&P 500, but let's just explain it a little bit. S&P 500 is an index of stocks, the 500 biggest companies in the country. And that's a benchmark for performers for the US stock market. So this is the history of that, the graph that we're showing here. And it's been a 10% return since inception from 1957. So, a 10% return is pretty good. And that's kind of what, at least myself, and I think a lot of people measure their investments around in terms of what to compare to. right? So should I buy this piece of property, or should I just invest my money in an index fund and earn 10%, right? That's always the calculus that I'm doing when I'm evaluating any investment, really. I'm comparing it to the S&P 500. You have any comments on that?
Yeah, just one thing to note is that most of the time when you're looking at reports on the annualized return of an index, like the S&P 500, that 10.7% that Motley Fool is reporting includes if you had reinvested all the dividends. So if you've invested over 30 years and you didn't take any cash flow or dividend income from those stocks that you own, but you reinvested all of that money, then you come up with an annualized return of 10.7%. But we're going to get into comparing this with investment properties, and many times we're looking at investment properties and not assuming you're going to reinvest all of that cash flow. You're thinking, hey, I'm going to get the cash flow, I'm going to go spend it, but it's not really calculating when you calculate return on investment properties that every penny of that cash flow is going to be reinvested. So there's a little bit of a delineation there when we look at a return on a rental property versus return on stocks, because stocks assume every penny of dividend income or distribution is reinvested in the same stock.
Yeah, and also just to circle back to your sequencing of returns, like imagine your retirement was, whoops, changed slides on me. Imagine your retirement was at this first big peak here right before the year 2000, right? You had two massive downturns in your first 10 years of retirement, and you didn't recover those assets, that asset value, until the teens, basically.
Yeah.
Right. And so the other nice thing about real estate is that it's going to cash flow regardless of what's going on in the market, and it can actually allow you to delay drawing your stocks until down the road when those prices have recovered, and allow your stocks to continue growing because you don't need to touch those. You can allow them to grow because you have other options.
Yeah, ultimate diversification.
Yeah. All right, so moving on. So just to illustrate again, back to 2 slides ago, but investing to beat inflation, right? So what I'm trying to show here is to have $5,000 a month in today's dollars, assuming 2.5% inflation, that's going to be $81.93 a month in 20 years from now. So how do we get there, right? So this calculator is from investor.gov, and it's an awesome website if you guys want to go play around with these things for yourself. There's a lot of really cool, powerful tools there that you can use. So I said, let's say we start with $0 here in our initial investment, and then what's it going to take to us for us to get to $2.5 million? Because that's how much we needed to get $81.93 20 years, $81.93 a month in 20 years. So I said, if you have 0 today, you would need to contribute $1,800 a month, and you would need 30 years at an estimated interest rate of return of 8%. That gets you to $22.5 million. That's a lot of money. So if you need $5,000 in today's income, if that's what you're living on, and you've got to contribute $1,800 a month, I mean, that's almost probably your whole take-home income.
Yep.
So the point that I'm trying to make here is just that it's hard, right? You can be very, very disciplined and live on half of your income today and invest the rest. That can work. People do that. But if you don't, then I believe that you're going to need another vehicle to get you there. Any comments on that?
No, I think you nailed it.
Cool. All right. So let's just say you're thinking at this point that you're a little behind, like my friend was. Another thing that you can do, of course, you're going to get, Social Security, and you can also go on the Social Security website and figure out for yourself what that benefit is going to look like, projected benefit, of course, but you can always work longer, right? I don't want you to have to, but that is an option, right? So keep in mind, the longer you delay Social Security, the more you get. You can take it early and get a little bit less. You can take your full benefit at age 67, or you can delay it and get quite a bit more. But again, if you have other sources of income, then why not delay Social Security 3 years and get 20% more at age 70? But you're not going to be able to do that if you haven't saved and invested wisely. Make sense?
Yeah, and I think it's debatable whether Social Security will be around in its current state in another 30 years. I'm not 100% comfortable myself banking that we're going to get all those dollars out as the website would forecast we are.
Fair. That's probably a whole nother webinar. So basically what we're saying is that there's sort of two paths, right? Path one is you can invest in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and build a portfolio of assets until you retire. Then you start drawing on those and then hope that you die before your money runs out. Option two, purchase a few homes that generate cash flow over time and allow the cash flow to fund your retirement. Then when you pass on, your heirs can get the property and the cash flow, which doesn't run out if the property is maintained and run like a business. And I would argue that there's a third path. Do both, right? There's no reason you have to do just one or the other. And I would say it's very important. And that's where I've seen investors, real estate investors, get in the most trouble is they don't have reserves and they don't have liquidity. That's certainly where people got in trouble back in 2008. And I see that's where people are going to get in trouble. And anytime I've seen clients that have gotten in trouble with rental properties, it's because of lack of liquidity. Real estate's great, but if that $2,000 or $3,000 a month payment has come due and you don't have it, and your property's not rented, and your roof breaks or your roof leaks that same month, and your furnace goes out that same month, you've got a liquidity problem. So I would argue that both is the most powerful way.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, so this just hits home for me because my grandparents came out of the Depression, both poor as a church mouse, and spent 60 years building a real estate portfolio. They built an apartment building, 90-unit apartment building. They had all kinds of land, lots. Just every penny they had went into real estate. And my grandmother was thinking, I got to spend this money before my crazy husband spends it on Arabian horses or Porsches or stupid depreciating assets. And so she was just, stock it away, which worked great until the real estate market pivoted. They had to foreclose on one of the buildings they had. They had a bunch of calls for capital all at the same time that they didn't predict. And they ended up having to fire sell a good number of their properties. One of them, they ended up selling back to the realtor who sold it to them. And then the realtor turned around and resold the property to Hilton Hotels 60 days later for $2 million more. So they just basically got put into a position where they had not enough liquidity, not enough diversification. Everything was in dirt and real estate that at the moment was not performing. And as a result of that, they left millions of dollars on the table. And so I think this is a really great lesson to say path A or path B is not as safe as path C, where you kind of are doing both those things at the same time.
I totally agree. And I just think you can't underestimate the importance of liquidity in being a real estate investor.
Yeah.
All right. So another reason we like real estate is you get paid in 5 ways. Okay. They are appreciation. So the value of the property goes up over time. Sometimes it goes down, but over history, it goes up. Amortization, that's the paying down of the mortgage. And if it's rental real estate, that's done by your tenants, which is nice. Cash flow, that's the difference between your expenses and your gross rental income. So that difference between those two things is called cash flow, and that comes to you, and you can do whatever you want with that. Depreciation, which is probably one of the most powerful pieces of real estate that a lot of people don't understand or appreciate. And we could do another class entirely on depreciation. But basically, the IRS allows you to sort of devalue the property on your taxes and take losses that you didn't have to actually incur in your bank account. And all the while, your property is truly appreciating. But on your taxes, they allow you to take an expense as if you are losing money. and that can offset your cash flow. And it can offset even more than that if you set yourself up in certain ways. And then finally, rent inflation. So rents go up over time. Rents are essentially follow inflation. So just like appreciation, there's rent inflation or rent appreciation. Your rents will increase over time while your mortgage stays the same or often is levered down because you have the opportunity to refinance anytime that rates drop. Warren Buffett talks about how a 30-year mortgage is one of the most powerful instruments in the world because it allows you to fix your cost while inflation goes up and up and up and up. And anytime rates go down, you can take advantage of it. He calls it a one-sided bet.
I love that. Yeah, just
So,
as an example, let me just if I could give it just a super quick example, because one of the first properties my mom and I bought was an 8-unit apartment building on Capitol Hill, right next to the Capitol, by the Utah Capitol downtown. And when we bought that building, we had 8 units at roughly $300 a month. It was bringing in about $2,400 a month, and our mortgage payment was $800 or $1,800. And by the time we paid for expenses, there was zero cash flow, right? They were all used with renovation. Well, fast forward 22 years later, those units don't rent for $300 a month. They rent for $1,500 a month. So now we're bringing in $12,000 a month-ish in rent, but we still have a mortgage payment of $2,400. So what used to be a massive mortgage payment to us in terms of the amount of income versus the amount of money going to pay the mortgage now is a minuscule mortgage payment because rent inflation has increased the differential or the delta between the mortgage payment and the rental income. And this isn't in this slide, but simultaneously, we've refinanced that loan 3 times. So that $1,800 payment isn't an $1,800 payment. We've refinanced it to lower rates over that time period. But that's really hard to think about when you're like buying your first property and you're looking forward. You can really only connect those dots 20 years down the road and go, oh my gosh, the difference between the mortgage payment and the rents is now huge. And I think you're going to kind of explain the rule of 72 on how people can extrapolate that.
Yeah. So the rule of 72 tells you how often your investment is going to double, and it works for any investment. So just for simplicity, right? Let's say that you get a rate of return of 10% on your stocks or whatever it is. So that would tell you divide 72 by 10. That tells you your money in your stocks should double about every 7 years. Okay, so with real estate, historically, the average appreciation in real estate is around 4%. So if we take 72 and divide it by 4, that gives us 18. So historically, real estate doubles about every 18 to 20 years. When I first got into business, my original mentor told me that real estate doubles every 20 years. And it truly just blew my mind. That's what kind of made me buy my first investment property. I thought to myself, well, gosh, I don't have to do anything all that creative. All I have to do is just buy a property and wait 20 years and I'll be all set, right? I'm just not that creative of a guy. So simple and straightforward is easy for me. But I just don't think people really understand that, if you go back and look at it, real estate really does double about every 20 years.
Yeah, and the same rule applies to rents. So
yes.
We're seeing Zillow's most recent report that I saw was that single family rents were rising at about 8-point-something% per year. Well, I don't know that that's going to keep up for the next 10 years, but just to kind of apply this logic, if you took 72, you divide by 8, that means that you're doubling your rents in 9 years. The amount of rental income is doubling. Now your mortgage payments stayed the same, but your rental income doubled, and you probably had an opportunity in those 10 years to refinance the mortgage payment down to a lower payment as well. So that's how the cash flow gets really huge over long periods of time.
Yeah. And if you haven't read it, go out today and buy Rich Dad Poor Dad and read it. It'll tell you all about this stuff. It's the classic book on investing in real estate. My dad paid me $100 to read it in high school, and I'd say it's the best investment he ever made. Cool. So moving on. All right, so I put together a little case study to kind of illustrate this stuff, okay? These are the 5 ways of getting paid in real estate. So let's say today you buy a $600,000 property at a 4% rate of return over 20 years. That property is going to be worth $1.3 million. Okay. Then you put a loan on it. Let's just say you put 20% down. So you start in year 1 with a $480,000 loan, 5.5% interest rate. And year 20, the tenants have paid that down for you to a $250,000 loan, right? So the first was appreciation. That's the increase in the value of the home. Second is amortization, tenants paying it down for you. The third, rental increase. So cash flow really is what this is. So let's say in year 1 that your rent is $2,800 a month, which is about essentially what covers your mortgage, right? You're not cash flowing when you start. And that's how I was on my first property too, Josh. I bought a 4-plex down in that same Capitol Hill neighborhood, and it was a break-even proposition. I was not making any money on that thing. But now my rents have more than doubled in the following 20 years.
And
So
you've refinanced and dropped your payment significantly as well over that time.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, because also let's talk about that for a second, because as not only as rates drop, right, your principal balance drops. So if you refinance, say 10 years in, and stretch that mortgage back out to a 30-year mortgage, then your payment's not only decreasing because of the rate dropping, but it's decreasing because you're stretching the principal or the term out again, and your payments drop more. And some people there'll probably questions about that in terms of, is that a wise idea? Shouldn't I just pay it off or pay extra or go to a 15-year? And that's something you certainly could do those things. Should we get into inflation-induced debt destruction, or is that a little too?
I think I would just look at it like this. If I can borrow money at 3, 4, 5% for 30 years fixed, I'm going to take that money and run, because I know that I can invest that money in real estate, that extra cash flow that would turn into savings, that would create additional investment opportunities. I know that I can get 8 to 14, 15, 16% on real estate over the long term. And if I can borrow it for and invest and get 10% plus, that's called arbitrage. That's what hedge funds and the BlackRocks of the world do. They borrow low, use leverage at a low rate, and take a high rate of return. And the difference in between is, really the money-making secret. So that's the why behind that strategy.
Absolutely. But when I first started too, I had no idea. I didn't have the long-term vision to know that rents double essentially every 20 years, conservatively, right? So I think it's powerful knowledge to think through that. So at the end of 20 years, this property is like having $1 million in a stock portfolio, just because you've got a value of 1.3 million. You've got rental income of $6,100 a month, and you've got a loan balance of $250,000. So with your mortgage payment of $2,725, the cash flow, so the amount that you get to take every month from the profit, is $3,400 a month. So using the 25x rule or the 4% rule, that's like having $1 million in stocks. But it's better in that not only do you have a cash flow that doesn't run out, you also have $1 million and over $1 million in equity, right? And you have the opportunity as well, if you wanted at that time, you can do a cash out refinance to 75% of the new value and take $734,000 cash in your hand, tax-free because it's loan proceeds.
Tax-free.
Yeah, tax-free because it's loans proceeds. And your new payment of $5,593, you still cash flow, what, about $500 plus a month. So you can have $734 in your hand and still get a couple $100 a month to live on.
And just to kind of preempt anybody who's looking at the numbers and saying, well, that doesn't cover any maintenance costs. True. Like we need to there's things in here that are hard to factor in, but you need to factor in some sort of an expense for maintenance costs. But the other thing this doesn't factor in, Drake, is you're assuming that you still have that payment of $27.25 a month. So that assumes that you never had the opportunity to refinance. It assumes that you didn't get 10 years in, and like you said, not only refinance to a lower rate, but re-amortize over 30 years, which would have increased your cash flow, which likely would have offset, a lot of those maintenance costs. So there are some variables on the plus and the negative side that aren't factored into this, but we're trying to prove a concept and not solve for every single one of those variables. So if anybody was stuck in the details there, just bear with me.
Yeah. And the reason I love this so much is because you've just created yourself a pension, right? It's an annuity. It's going to continue to pay you, right? If you don't want to manage it, put it in property management. Have your grandkids manage it, right? Then they're learning some skills, and they're going to inherit the property anyway, right?
If they're good, if they're not naughty.
Exactly. Okay.
I love that.
So, yeah, let's move on with that. So another cool thing about real estate is generational wealth. It helps you create generational wealth, and a big way that you do that is through a stepped up basis. And what that means is when you pass on, if you pass it to your heirs, the value is adjusted to the value of the property that it is on the day that you die.
The tax basis is adjusted to the value of the property on the day that you die, right? Correct.
Yes.
Yep.
So if you purchase a home in 2022 for 600, in 2042 it's worth 1.3 million. When assuming you pass that year, the loan's 250, so you have $1.05 million in equity. So if you were to sell that property and take the money out, you potentially have capital gains on the order of about $157,000. Which you'd still have a ton of money left over. That's still fine, but you'd be better off leaving it to your heirs to inherit, and then they inherit it as if they bought it on that day for 1.3 million. And any depreciation that you've taken is wiped away, and there's no capital gains because they've inherited your property.
So put these two equations together, and we didn't go deep into depreciation, and we can do a whole nother class on that. But basically, if you depreciate an asset, and you have to qualify under a couple of different mechanisms in the IRS code for this, but if you depreciate the value of the asset, that is a counter to your taxable income. So you're paying less tax throughout your life, meaning you're retaining more money, which you can reinvest. And then when you die, you pass that asset on to your kids or grandkids or whoever in your family you're going to pass that on to, and then they don't pay taxes on the increase in value of that property, because the basis or the means by which the IRS assesses what you pay taxes on is reassessed all the way up to the current value of the property. So if it's valued at 1.3 and you sell it at 1.3, there's no taxes. So you really skip taxes in 2 generations. I skipped it in my generation because I didn't pay the IRS on my income because I took depreciation, and my kids, when they go to sell it, they don't pay taxes. So it's a multi-generational tax loophole, if you will, by owning real estate.
Yeah. And if you sell, there's depreciation recapture. So you have to pay the IRS. If I sell it, right, in my lifetime, I have to not only pay capital gains, but you have to recapture that depreciation that you've taken. But if you leave it to your heirs and they get it, the depreciation is wiped clean as well.
Uma, do you not understand depreciation or the stepped up basis? Which one? And let me try to dive in, because this is such a huge property they pay taxes on. The kids will inherit the 1.3. Okay, so let me just give you a quick example. Let's say that you paid I'll just use easy math. You paid $500,000 for a home, and you sold it for $1 million. You would need to, if it was an investment property, or if for some reason it didn't qualify for a primary residence exclusion, you would need to pay taxes on the difference of whatever your CPA or accountant determines is your basis, and what you sell the property at. That's a capital gains tax you're going to have to pay. But if you die, the estate actually values that asset. They have an appraiser go out, or there's different means by which you can value that asset. And then the basis, instead of 500,000, what you paid for it, goes up to the current value of $1 million. Then the next day your kids sell it at $1 million. They don't pay that capital gains. So it's called a step up basis, because it's not what your basis is. Let's say it was 500,000. It steps up to whatever the current value of the property is. So your kids inherit a stepped up basis. Did that clarify it? Yes, good, because I didn't have any other way to explain it. So I'm glad I'm glad we got a win.
Nailed it.
And I think we should do a subsequent class on depreciation, and like what it takes to qualify for that as a real estate professional and under the nightly rental rules. And then we can dive deeper into the stepped up basis.
Yeah. Because it's powerful, life-changing stuff. I mean, you can change your grandkids' future with this stuff, you guys. So, all right, move on. So we're going to talk a little bit about house hacking. And because the reason for that is that I find the limiting factor for most people in buying rental real estate and investing in real estate is the down payment, right? So if you called up Josh or I and said, hey, I want to buy a rental property, can you help me out with a mortgage? If it's just a straight up rental property, then we'll say, great, 25% down on $1 million fourplex, that's $250,000, right? That's a lot of money. That's a pretty big barrier to entry. And so what house hacking is, it's a strategy of using mortgage guidelines to achieve multiple low down payment loans to acquire properties, or generating income from income opportunities from renting rooms or units in a home. You want to add anything to that, Josh?
No, I think you nailed it.
Okay, so here are some ways that you can do that. Okay, so you can buy a single family home and you can rent out rooms. I talked to a firefighter that my buddy introduced me to, and he was a young guy. He bought a single family home. He's a single guy, and he rented out 3 of his rooms. Those 3 rooms were paying in all the mortgage. So he was living mortgage free because he was renting out his rooms to other people. An ADU, accessory dwelling unit. So that's like a mother-in-law is another name for that. So, you can find a single family home where you can add a basement apartment, or you can build a garage and build a casita, or build a loft over the garage, or build a casita. Some people are now calling them barn dominiums. Have you heard that one?
Oh yeah.
Barn dominiums. So in a lot of cities now are really encouraging them, because as everybody knows, there's a shortage of affordable housing. And so many of the cities, I know Salt Lake is one of them, is really changing their zoning and encouraging these things. And there's ways to build them pretty cost effectively. So another house hack is buying a duplex, living in one half, renting out the other. You can even rent out the rooms that you're not living in your half, and rent out the other half if you want to get really aggressive. A kiddie condo. So you can buy a property for your kids that are going away to college. If you've set them up well with your credit, with their credit, and help them build a credit score, they can buy it as their primary residence, and you can co-sign with as little as 3 or 5% down. Okay. So, one of our colleagues here, I think 2 of our colleagues here at our office have done that. And they started building their kids' credit at 16 years old. And by the time they were 18, they had high credit scores and several lines of credit, and they were ready to buy a home with the parents' income supporting them. You could buy a second home and do nightly rentals. Second homes have a little bit lower down payment requirements, as little as 10%. Partnering. I'm partnered on probably, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 out of my 12 different properties. I've partnered with friends on, and it's a good way to defer risk and lower the capital amount that you have to come in with. You can consider investing in different states. A lot of people are investing in the Midwest and the Southeast, just because simply those prices are quite a bit less than certainly here in Utah or a lot of places along the coasts. So that allows you just to go, if you are buying just a straight up rental property 25% down, you can buy a $150,000 house in Lexington, Kentucky. So 25% down is a lot less down. And a lot of those markets, the rents are quite a bit higher relative to the purchase price than they are in here in Utah and a lot of the coastal markets. You can buy a new primary residence and move every couple of years. This is one of my favorites. We just closed a client today. He called me and he said, you know, I'm not feeling where I need to be in terms of my retirement. We analyzed the situation and we figured out that the lowest hanging fruit for this client was to buy a new primary residence. He happened to be a physician and we had a 0 down physician loan for him. So with a new physician, he bought a new home, primary residence that he moved into with a 0 down physician loan. And then he ended up turning his current home into a nightly rental, which then he's going to be able to do some really powerful accelerated depreciation things with and get a massive tax return next year. And then finally, the BRRRR method. BRRRR stands for buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and then there's actually another R, repeat. So basically the idea with the BRRRR is that you're finding something that's under market and pretty beat up and you're acquiring it. Oftentimes you have to do this, you don't always, but a lot of times you have to do this with private money or cash to get the good deal and move quickly. Then you go ahead and renovate it, thereby increasing the value of the property. Once it's renovated and rented out, the value is much higher. Then you can take 75% cash out of that new value and oftentimes recoup all of your money, allowing you to recycle that money and just keep using the one original principal investment over and over and over. Did I explain that well enough?
Yeah, I think you did great. Do you want to, I mean, you're kind of doing the BRRRR method right now on the property that you're investing in back east. Do you want to, although you may sell it, you may rent it out, whatever,
Yeah.
but it is kind of that model. Do you want to just quickly hit on that at a high level?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I'll just go through the numbers really quickly. This is a property we found in Philadelphia, and we bought it. It was, I mean, it was as gnarly as you can imagine. I mean, like I wouldn't have spent a night in this place. It was that gross. So we bought it under market. We bought it for about $140,000. It's a single family home, but it's zoned to be a duplex. So what we're going to do is we've got financing where we were actually able to acquire this because it's an investment property. There's an investment property loan we can talk about that. We were able to acquire it for $140,000. The loan that we used is allowing us to finance the renovations. So we're putting $200,000 in renovations into this property. So we're into it $340,000. And the appraisal, the ARV or after repair value of the appraisal, when it's all done, is going to be $510,000. So we can get all of our money back because 340 is about 65% of, or 70% of 510. We can get all of our money that we put into it back and just put it on a long-term mortgage. And we essentially have no money into the property, 25% equity, and the rents on the property will cover the mortgage. So we're actually doing this. We're probably going to end up flipping it, but I don't love flipping personally. I just think it's risky. I'm not averse to it, but I'm more of a buy and hold kind of guy. But the only reason I did this is because if I'm in a market where I can't sell it and can't flip it, then I own a duplex that's going to cash flow and I can just hang out and hold it as long as I want. And time heals all in real estate. So that might be something to park on for a minute too.
Yeah, I'll just tell you real quick. I know we're getting close on time, so we got to move. But I'll tell you the two of these that I've seen people have incredible success with. This kitty condos bullet point, where if you've got a kid that is, going to college or is in that first time home buyer age, and the ability to co-sign with that kid and get an owner occupied rate, but then the kid maybe lives there for a year, moves out and buys another home. That home becomes a rental property. Maybe you co-own that, or you work out an equity deal, with the kid. I've seen somebody go from 0 rental properties to 11 rental properties in 3 years, and they put 5% down and got amazing owner occupied rates, or 5 or 10% down on all of those. And so the ability to get really awesome financing and very low cost and put little down is an unbelievable vehicle. And the other one that I was going to mention was the buy and move every 5 years. You know, we work with a lot of medical professionals and doctors that can qualify for 100% financing at great terms and rates. And even if you can't, and you only put 5% down, you live in it in a couple of years, you turn it into a rental. Maybe you do something to improve the value, or create like a mother-in-law, or you have an accessory dwelling unit, you rent it out and then turn around and move. So you can build your rental pool pretty big without massive down payments if you start to use some of these strategies that Drake has shown us here.
Cool.
Yeah, grandkids need to grow up faster.
All right, well, let's move in the interest time. So just on this slide, just keep in mind there are a lot of low down options. I mean, if you're a veteran, you can do 0 down. There's physician loans that are low, even conventional 3 to 5% down. FHA, those are great. I mean, if I could scream from the rooftops for a college kid to buy a duplex on an FHA loan with 3.5% down, I think that's the smartest thing a young person could do, is start out that way. And then just wanted to give you guys some ideas in terms of where can you get money for your down payment, because people don't know about this stuff. So you can get a HELOC on your current home and use that for a down payment on rental. You can borrow from your 401k. You're paying yourself back interest, right? You're not rating your 401k and paying penalties and all that. You're just taking a loan from it, and that you can use that as a down payment on a mortgage. You can get gifts, not on an investment property truly, but you can get one on an owner occupied property, but can be a source of down payment. There's different ways to use Roth IRAs and self-directed IRAs. That could be its own class to buy real estate. You can use your tax fund for a down payment. The seller can cover your closing costs, and then of course other people's money. So I've seen strategies where, you know, one person is the credit partner and the other person has money, and they're the down payment partner. So you could consider doing that. And of course, you know, using other people's money in terms of banks' money, using high leverage, high loan to value loans is most ideal. So we wanted to talk about a little bit then versus now, of course, because, you know, interest rates are higher than they've been in my career. And, you know, we've got a lot of people that are just saying, look, I'm just going to wait. Rates are too high. It's not going to cash flow. So I'm just going to hold off. But what we want to do is compare, you know, the last couple of years versus now. So in 2020, 21, if you wanted to buy a property, you were having to offer over the asking price, right? There's multiple offers. You weren't able to have any contingencies. You were having to put non-refundable earnest money down on day one with no inspection. The upside was that there was cheap money, right? But if you are a first-time home buyer or a young buyer with a low down payment loan, a lot of times sellers were just rejecting those offers because they wanted a cash buyer, which they could get, or they wanted somebody with 20% down just because they felt like that was a stronger offer, right? So the money was cheap, but the property was expensive and hard to get. So now, 2022, money's more expensive, but there's a lot more inventory to choose from. You have a ton more protection in your contract. You can have time to make decisions. You have time to do inspections. You have way more negotiating power in terms of price, and more importantly, seller concessions. We're getting amazing concessions from sellers right now. We got one, the seller paid $25,000 in concessions that we closed earlier this week. You can always refinance later to a lower rate. And
Drake, just real quick, concessions. Will you tell people what a concession is and what you use that $25,000 for?
Exactly. So a concession is rather than price reduction. So say they're asking $500,000 for a home and you offer them $475,000. You'll say, I'll offer you $500,000 for this home, but I want you to give me a concession towards my closing costs. So it's a credit towards your closing costs and down payments. And we're using those to reduce the rate either temporarily through 3-2-1 or a 2-1 buy down that lowers your rate up to 3% the first year of your mortgage, or a permanent buy down where it lowers you, a little bit less, but it's a permanent throughout the loan buy down. And we're having a lot of success making things affordable that were not otherwise affordable doing that. Is that good?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. The one thing that I would mention is, my opinion is the real estate market is on a bit of a pause because of the affordability shock of a payment at a 7% rate. But through some of the strategies that Drake's talking about, these temporary buy downs. So just to define what a 3-2-1 buy down is, let's say that the loan was a 7% market rate today. Well, year one, the interest rate would be reduced by 3%. So year one, you'd pay you'd make a payment based on 4%. Year two, you'd make a payment based on 5%. Year three, you'd make a payment based on 6%. And then year four and each year thereafter, you'd make a payment based on 7%. But here's what I would say. We're not solving for 30 years right now. We only have to get to the place where inflation comes down a little bit. Mortgage interest rates will go down. They'll follow inflation, and we'll have an opportunity to refinance all these loans. So if we can help somebody take a 4% rate year one and a 5% rate year two, and in 12 to 18 months, we're refinancing that loan back to wherever a lower inflation and interest rate environment, then you've essentially solved for the problem, which is the interest rate problem today, but you've been able to take what the market's offering, which is more inventory, safer terms for your purchase contract, and then utilize that concession from the seller to pay for that buy down in the interest rate. That's the smartest thing that anybody can employ right now in this market.
Yeah, and speaking of opportunity, the opportunity for investors and folks that can sort of see the long game here is that, a lot of people are really scared, and they're just, like you said, they're on pause. We're talking to so many buyers that are just like, I'm going to wait it out, right? But what we're seeing and hearing is that if and when rates do come down, and Fannie Mae's predicted that rates are going to be in the mid-4s next year, what do we think is going to happen to the market? Right? There's still not enough homes for the amount of families that need homes. And so if rates drop back down, everyone's going to be flooding back in, and the competition is going to come right back. And so the opportunity right now is that because so many people are on the sidelines, sellers are not getting as many offers as they were, and are a little more, I don't want to say desperate, but certainly negotiable than they have been in the past 2 years. Right. And so that's, I think this is also a Warren Buffett quote: when there's blood in the streets, buy real estate, right? Because the reason for that is it's really hard to get a good deal on a stock, right? Because their books are seen by everybody and it's public information. But on real estate, it's very easy to be mispriced, or someone just puts themselves in a bad position through financial mismanagement, and they just need to sell, or they need to move and get out of there, right? So that's the opportunity, is because you don't have as much competition as you did in the last couple of years, you're more in the driver's seat than you have been in many, many years as a buyer.
Yes.
So we're just about out of time. I just wanted to kind of park on that for just a minute. We are short 4 million homes in terms of inventory, according to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Current household formations, in terms of what that means, is the number of homes, new families that are being created, is averaging 1.6 million currently. And single family.
That's like that, just to clear that, household formations, that can be a little confusing. That's like, our 18-year-old kids moving out of our house, moving into their own home, or a household formation would be, maybe somebody moving from another country into the United States, or maybe there's a couple that separates and now there's 2 households. So that's all tracked by the U.S. government, and they call it, U.S. household formations.
And the assumption is that those people will need someplace to live, right?
Right.
And so, however, single family home completions right now are only averaging at 1 million per year. So we're losing inventory. Builders have hit the brakes in a massive way during this time. They learned from the 2008 recession. They kept building back in 2005, 2006, 2007. Now they're saying, we're not going to make that mistake again. We're hitting the brakes right now. And so the inventory problem is not getting better. It's getting worse.
So just to tie a bow on that, what we're saying, and the reason why I previously said we think the real estate market's on a bit of a hold, when interest rates went up and affordability went down, that paused demand. There's less demand from buyers at a 7% rate than there was at a 4% rate. That totally makes sense. But the other side of that equation is the supply. And the supply was 4 million homes short when we went into this market that we're in. And since the builders have slammed on the brakes of building any new homes, we're actually having 600,000 more household formation than homes are being completed. So the supply side has continued to be constrained. And as soon as demand picks back up, so as soon as we enter into a recession or inflation starts to come down, mortgage rates are going to go down with it. All that demand is going to come back, but we still have the supply imbalance. And that's going to put us right back into the situation where things are just going to get nutty, because it's not like we handled the shortfall of homes.
Exactly. Yeah. And as I just said, Fannie Mae's projecting rates in the next year of around 4.5. So, all these people that are on the sidelines are waiting for rates to come down. It's just building up buyers. And so, why do you want to compete with all those people when rates come down? Why not go find a deal on a property and then refinance next year when rates come down? So yep. I think we did it. So what we do on a regular basis, if anyone wants to, is we can help you find your low-hanging fruit and help you figure out how to build out a plan to acquire investment properties, cash flow them over time, and start sort of building your own pension so that you can have a more secure retirement. So please reach out. And if you guys want to throw out any more questions, we're happy to stick around for a minute and answer those.
Hey, real quick, Drake, we created a download, which is essentially how to evaluate different areas across the country to make sure that you're buying into an economically vibrant community. So it checks things like unemployment levels, are wages going up, are wages going down, what's the population growth in that area. It checks like a bunch of those factors to make sure that you don't like make a whoopsie. That seemed like it was a great buy, but the economy is really drying up in this area. And I think that Colin emailed you that link. It might be worth just pulling that up really quickly or dropping it in the chat. I'll answer one other. Oh, hey, look at that. I think Colin did it. Download at www.mettlehq.com.rg. Maybe you could just pull that up on the screen if you have a chance, Drake. I'll answer a quick question from Krista real quick. So Krista, if you look at the demographics of the baby boomers, you had this huge spike in birth rate. And then that went way down with my generation, right? Gen X. And then the birth rate went way back up with millennials and Gen Z. So the size of the millennials and Gen Zs that are now becoming first-time homebuyers is a larger demographic number, if you combine those two generations, than is baby boomers. So there was a big fall off between baby boomer generation and Gen X, my generation. We went from about a $4 million birth rate per year down to about a 3.2 million birth rate per year. Millennials to Gen X, boomers to Gen X. But then if you look at the birth rate into millennials and Gen Z, you're back to that 4 million birth rate. So those homes should be absorbed by those first-time home buyers is the point. I don't know if I say it as Mujica, but I'm going to just allow you to talk because you've got your hand up there. Let's see. Feel free to come off of mute and ask any question.
Is that Barbara?
Hi, Drake. Yes, I'm so sorry. I think that was a mistake. I didn't mean to raise my hand.
Oh no, you have to ask a question now, Barbara. You've done it.
Well, I asked one earlier about the loan buy down, and I think you said Drake would reach out. So I'm okay
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, there's a few steps on how to orchestrate the interest rate buy down and include that in your offer. So I would recommend, you know, getting on a quick phone call with Drake and talking through those, because it does vary a little bit about your loan program, and there is some caveats to that you have to be aware of.
Perfect. Thank you.
Uma, just raise your hand, or I can just invite you here. I'll just hit a button here that says allow you to talk, Uma, and then wait, where did you go? Where did Uma go? And then you should be able to talk. Hold on one second. There you are. What were you gonna say, Drake?
Krista had another question as well. We can circle back
cool.
to that.
Unmute.
Uma,
Can you guys hear me?
You're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, great guys. This is very interesting. So if you have a situation, let's say myself and my husband, I've been wanting to invest in real estate, but I never had his blessings most of the time. He is a stock guy. He not really interested in a lot of investment properties. He doesn't feel whatever. But anyway, my house is totally paid off. And if I want to start creating this portfolio that I want to start doing. My grandkids are too young. I can't use the kiddie condo plan. I like the buy and move every few years, but the other problem is he's not a moving type of guy. Can I just do it on my own?
In terms of doing primary residences,
Yeah. So I just go and stay on my own for 2 years or what is the time? Is it 2 years or 1 year?
it's 1 year. Yeah, so you can live in a property that the assumption is that you're going to live there 1 year. Well, if you're the challenge with that is underwriters are always trying to sniff out occupancy fraud, and so
Right.
if you're really going to go live in the property, then yes, you absolutely can do that. But if you're not, then no, you have to do something else. And if you're going to say, look, we're going to move to St. George, right? Because we want to be warm. And you're going to go live down there for a year. That's something an underwriter would have no problem with, I believe.
But so when you say live, I'm going to ask this question. It's continuous. Do you have to show them they're living that continuously?
Primary residence.
I mean, I'm sure the utility bills and everything's there. So you cannot rent the property meanwhile. I can be in Utah, Salt Lake for 2 months and then go back to St. George. That's not allowed.
Your primary residence has to be, 51% primary of the time where you spend the night, right? But you could do a second home with as low as 10% down.
Okay.
And you can use leverage from your paid off house as in the form of an equity line to use that as your down payment, right?
Yeah.
And you're not pulling money out of any of your
Yeah, but I
stocks.
need him to sign to the dotted line, which is not going to happen. So I got to do everything that's under my control. So I can keep, I like the second home option with the 10% down. And so does that come with any lending restrictions or anything like that?
I might just suggest like a full consultation. We do typically what's called a goals and dreams analysis, which helps us get an overview of your full kind of financial picture.
Yeah.
And then from there, once we can see all the players on the chessboard, then we can we can start to give you advice on how to move those chess pieces across the board. But without seeing all the players that you have on the table, it becomes a little difficult to uncover all the opportunities.
Totally agree. I just had an appointment set up with Drake. I am for tomorrow, I think. I don't know if you got the invite.
Sweet.
Perfect.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll talk to you tomorrow and then we'll see where we can go from there. This was great. Good insights, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emma.
Krista, you had a question about 5% down and will it cash flow with 5% down? Is that, I saw that one in the chat.
Basically, I'm like, okay, I've only ever done 20% down or 25% down.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, hey, if you actually can get a 5% down rate, can you really cover the mortgage with the rent that you'll be paid, or what do you need to plan for in terms of additional monthly investment for a small time period?
So if you're buying a true straight up rental property, you can't do that with 5% down, right? But what I would suggest is that I bet you live in a house where you have a super low mortgage rate and a ton of equity. And if you rented out your current house, it would cash flow a bunch and you could go buy a new house with 5% down. And some of that cash flow from your departing house would cover the delta between your current payment and your new payment. That's what I'm talking about in terms of low hanging fruit.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And Krista, I know your kids are too young for this, but the other strategy that is, I've just seen massive success, like literally inside of our office. I've watched people become millionaires in value and create a significant amount of cash flow in a 5-year period by buying homes for kids. Kids live in it for a year while they're going to college, and then they move to another house and they turn that property into a rental property. And the rental rates are going up so incredibly fast. You know, when they first moved in, it was like, it's about what we would pay in rate. Maybe it's $100 more. And within a year, there's $500-600 a month or more in cash flow when they move out. So there are things like that we can potentially uncover and make opportunities aware to you. So if you want to go deeper down the rabbit hole, just, schedule some time with Drake and let him brainstorm on the situation.
Yeah, no, I am wondering. I'm just like, hey, would it be better to try to capitalize on an opportunity now with some home equity, or like when our kids are, it's only about 5 years away.
Oh my gosh.
The first will go to college, so it's a little frightening, but anyway, yes. And then the other one is 4 years behind that one. So.
Well, you got 2 investment properties on the horizon for sure.
Sure.
I love it. Thank you, guys.
You bet, buddy.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions we can answer? Sam Robinson, what's up, buddy? I imagine with the increase in demand as rates come down, we'll likely see substantial appreciation, higher home prices in the next 12 to 18 months. Is that accurate, or do you think prices will be somewhat stable for a bit longer to recover for the massive appreciation for the past couple of years? That additional leverage, if you buy now, is huge to help get the second, third, or fourth home sooner. Yeah. So, Sam, I hope you don't mind me telling just a little bit about your story, but Sam is one of the people that I've seen really master these technologies where, he bought a first home with very little money down, lived in it for a few years, leveraged some of the equity in it, refinanced it to a lower rate to remove mortgage insurance, rented it out to create cash flow, then bought the next property as a primary residence with very little down. And he's done that several times and has created an incredible amount of cash flow and an incredible amount of equity in a short period of time. So my thesis, Sam, is that we still have a massive undersupply of homes in the United States relative to the number of households. So there's 130 million households in the United States, approximately, and we have 1.28 million homes for sale. If you compare that to like 2007, in 2007, there was 116 million households. So we have 14 million more households today than we did in 2007. And there was 4 million homes for sale. So there was a lot more supply with a lot less households in 2007. If you compare 2007 to now, we have a massive shortfall in the number of homes. As soon as rates go down and the renters come off the sidelines and the kids move out of the parents' house, because now it's not a 7% rate, it's a 5% rate, and the house now feels affordable, we're going to be right back into that situation where we have way more demand than we have supply, and home values are going to go up. How far do they go up? I think it depends on how affordable houses get and how low those interest rates go. Like, in other words, if rates go to 5, maybe we see 5% appreciation rates. If rates go back down to 4, mortgage rates I'm talking about, then I think we could be right back into that double-digit appreciation mode again. And keep in mind, as rates go down, people's wages right now are growing because of inflation. It's pushing up people's wages, and the amount of, like, you've heard of they call it the great what do they call it? The great resignation. Yeah. Basically, it's like, hey, you're giving me $5,000 a month. I can quit today and go work over here for $6,500 a month. So wages are going up. And I think as wages go up and we see rates go down, you're going to see a lot of improvement on the demand side of the equation. Hey, Colin, Uma said that link isn't working. You're welcome, Sammy. Any comments on why that might not be working or what Uma can do?
Let me send you another link. I apologize.
No worries, buddy. Oh, yep. It says it's not secure.
Yeah, I typed it wrong. I apologize. Let me put it back in the chat for you guys.
No problem. All right, team. Well, I think sorry, Mike, we'll get you a new link here in just a second. Also, we have all your, if you registered for this event, we have your email as a registrant, and we'll send that link as a follow-up after the event.
And
Thanks, Colin.
we'll start planning our next class on depreciation, because it's been playing the depreciation game and really understanding that. I didn't understand it until I was 14 or 15 years into real estate investing, and it's been absolutely life-changing. So and there are some things that you can take advantage of this year and that are going to start phasing out soon. So maybe we should do that pretty soon, Josh.
Yeah, I'd love it. We'll do that. We'll get an invitation out. The new link does work. Here's what it looks like when you go to the website. And with that, I think we should call this a successful class. Thanks for everybody. Oh yeah, Uma, email Drake. We have a great CPA that deals just with real estate professionals and investors and can help with the tax side of things. All right, everybody. Thanks for a great evening. Appreciate all your participation. Thanks for hanging out with us late night, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their evening.